should pick up much better out towards the Pacific Northwest. 73 from Kilo November 4, India, Romeo Mike.
Hi, I'm Dave, VE7VR, and this is my shack, which is located in a 25-story high-rise in Burnaby, British Columbia. Now, typically, you wouldn't expect to find a shack in such a location, but I'm going to explain to you a little bit today as to how that's possible with the technology that we have available. It's not just the technology, of course. There's some politics involved when you're involved with a strata or homeowners association situation, which a lot of times has to be overcome, or in some cases cannot be overcome. But anyway, I'm thankful I got through the process, and I have the installation, and I can talk to you more about how that worked out at another time. So just to give you a kind of an idea of what we're going to do here today, I'm going to give you a short tour of some of the hardware pieces down here and how it makes it work, and also follow the signal from the shack here on the 14th floor up to the top of the building into another location where the radio and other control apparatus is located, not to mention the antenna. There's no wire link between here and there, and I'll show you how that works. It's basically a Wi-Fi point-to-point system. This is really not meant to be a how-to video. It's just going to give you an overview of the system integration that's involved, and it is fairly involved. I wouldn't take on a task like this unless you had good familiarity with things like routers, certainly the computer, and all the sort of interface hardware wiring and stuff that might be required. There's a step-by-step procedure, and certainly you can learn it along the way, but it's not trivial. It's not a plug-and-play situation. The components of the setup are essentially a suitable radio. I'll talk about that. A computer that does the configuration, control, and logging. There's the RemoteRig, in this case, RemoteRig boxes, which I'll show you a little bit about. You need a link between here and the remote location. Depending on how far away it is, it might be, in this case, it could be Ethernet cable, or in my case, Wi-Fi. But it could also be covering that section on the internet, and you're not limited by distance. So it could be from anywhere in the world, the link between here and where the radio is. You use essentially a normal computer with a browser that does the software, nothing really exotic from a software point of view. There is another piece of software which I don't require because I have a separate front panel here. But there's a piece of software called Ham Radio Deluxe that simulates the front panel of a radio and duplicates the controls as best it can with most of the modern radios. So you can put the whole radio remote, including the front panel. The benefit of what I'm using here is that the front panel has been removed, and the radio part you take away, and that goes up where the antenna is. And you still have the front panel and the comfort of that, of being able to turn the knobs and do all that stuff. So so if you're going to have a remote location that's connected by the internet, you really need to have a solid internet connection at the other end. Certainly at the home end you have to. At the other end, it needs to be reliable and good setup so that you're not having to drop out. Clearly, if you've got a setup that's a long way away, might be difficult to travel there, particularly if it's in another country, to try and do a reset. So just to give you a better look here, this is a spare box, but I'll show you kind of what it looks like, if you can see it okay. There's different connections here for things like Wi-Fi, a microphone. Actually, the key paddle plugs into it. It's got an internal keyer, And there's a box like this down here, and there's a box like this on the roof. And basically these things replicate all of the signals that are required from a front panel to the radio to make the control work. And that connects it to the system. The instructions that come with this show you how to strap the internal connections for each particular radio. And they've got a pretty good comprehensive list, so most of the modern radios would be covered. If you're not comfortable with things like Ethernet and Wi-Fi and all that, I wouldn't start a project like this. But you know, if you need it, there's probably people around who could help, and there's instructions and books and all that kind of stuff that'll guide you through the process as well. The RemoteRig box is a nice solution. I think MFJ's got one. This one happens to be made by Microbit, a Swedish company. They've been around probably for, I don't know, 10 or 15 years doing this. So they've got a lot of experience. In my case, I'm using a Kenwood TS480, which was a radio that was built for mobile use. You put the control head in the front of your car, you put the radio in the trunk. So the guys at Microbit figured, hey, it doesn't have to be that limited. It can be anywhere. And they developed this interface so that you can remote the front panel from the radio, not just for mobile use, but for any kind of use. So the products like Flex Radio, which is, you know, the new, fairly new SDR, or kind of leading the charge in the SDR world, has remote as a native application inside the radio. So you wouldn't need to have any external boxes. You have the front panel, which is made by them, called Maestro, and then you have this whole separation, which is already done by the radio, and that could be up on the roof. So there's that. There's I'm going to show you in subsequent sections here how the connections are made, and also a tour up onto the roof and show you what goes on up there. And down here, I'm just going to cover this in a second here, a little bit closer view of the software, and then we'll go outside and show you how all that works as well. Okay, stand by. Okay, we're back again. So I'm just going to give you a little better close-up view of the hardware here and the software. So you hear that actually the band's not too bad today, so there's some. Show you what's happening here. Must be talking about COVID. Okay, we'll just back off on that for now. So this is the control head for the TS480. It has a little. Actually, just move this. It's got a little base and a little tilt base, and then it's got kind of rubber on the bottom, and you just kind of stick it down there, and it then just sits there quite nicely. On the outside, there's an extra audio. You could use the internal speaker, but I have a separate speaker system so that I can hear it a little bit better. So this is a connection that would normally go to the radio, but what it does is this connection goes to the control box, which is over here. And it gives you all of the functions that would normally be here on the radio. So it kind of simulates the radio connection, and then it takes the signals upstairs, which I'll show you momentarily. So this is the RemoteRig box. There's different microphones you can plug into it. I've got the Heil headset, so microphone for using Vox. I've also got a foot switch and push to talk, so that's all available. I have an external keyer here. This is made by Microham. So if you're using something like contesting software, you need to have an external box like this, or I think you can make up a little interface so the computer can directly drive CW. But better to have that external keyer, and a lot more functional. And I don't have the Vox set up on it currently, so I can just show you the keyer anyway. So it's always ready to go. And if I put it on the right mode, I can go ahead and do that. So yeah, so that's really all that's here. I won't show you the back end of it, but there is the business end of kind of it is an Ethernet cable that goes over to a router, and I'll show you that momentarily. See if there's anybody around.
I have a new lady in my life. She's gorgeous. Oh man, she is a beautiful Spanish lady. Over.
Wow, lucky him. Okay, so let's just take a look over here. So this is a router, and you may have a router, you know, pretty much like this. There's several manufacturers. This is a Linksys, and I won't go into the whole configuration thing, but there's definitely some configuration that is required in the router. And what's plugged into the router is the computer and the radio box. And then there's also something called a Ethernet, power over Ethernet signal injector. And I'll pick that up on the next video here coming up shortly. And it'll carry on. One thing I meant to do, and I will do now, is show you just a little bit of how this software looks. So basically this is a browser, and you can see here the Orca website. And I'll just close that for now. So in this case, I've got an IP address for each of the boxes. So there's one on the roof with an IP address and the other one down here. And all the configuration can take place, and you can look at it and see what the situation is. There's a status, if you can see this without getting fuzzy. There's a status indicator. You can look at all the various functions, make sure it's all working properly. So in this case, this is the RemoteRig on the roof. Now, if I go over to this one and click on here, then this one brings up the RemoteRig in the shack. So I can look at the status and do all the same things with that. And this is just in a browser. What we have here in the middle is also just software that's supplied by them to control stepper. So on the roof, I have a stepper vertical. If you're familiar with the stepper, it has a stepper motor, which is controlled by a control box. And you'll see that in a few minutes here when I go upstairs. But the software is pretty straightforward. You know, if I want to change bands, you can see right now it's set up 14050. If I want to go on a different band, I can go click there, click here, click again. There it's on 15 meters. This little red thing says that the antenna is moving. So it's moving from 20 meters to 15, so it's getting a little shorter, and then it's done. You see it turned off, and should be ready to go. So it's actually pretty straightforward. I can also automate this so that when you change frequency on the radio, it automatically changes. So, but anyway, it gives you an idea. It's not that complicated. Wi-Fi transceiver that's out on the deck, which I'll show you shortly. This is called a power over Ethernet injector. So there's basically a power supply here, and the Ethernet in, Ethernet out. And the one that's going out, unfortunately, I don't have any other way to do this, but it goes out through a window. And you can see that it's kind of crude here, going underneath the window. So I got to work on that and then figure out what to do next with that. But next time we'll get on here, I'll show you that I'm outside. So as you can see, basically it comes out of the window and follows along the track here, and and it'll get cleaned up ultimately, but basically it goes all the way out here to this device. So what this is a wireless or a Wi-Fi transceiver made by a company called Ubiquiti, and it is connected by wire to my router. And then from then, so we're going to look at what it's looking at. So it's a directive antenna that's on the surface here, and it's pointing up that way. So I'll go up the building here. You'll see what's happening up at the top. Unfortunately, we're getting some reflection off the glass, but up on the top, you can see it very well. There's another transceiver that's exactly the same, and it's receiving and transmitting on Wi-Fi, and that's how the signal gets from my apartment up to the 25th floor. So I'll go up there and show you where it goes from there. Here we are. So I have now taken the elevator up to the penthouse level, and this is the stairway entrance to the last portion, up to where the antenna and the equipment are. Most people in the building don't have a key to access this floor, so just lucky that I happen to have one. You go through this door, you go up this way, we'll go outside in a minute. This is the mechanical room, see, it says mechanical, and we'll just go in there. So what we have in here basically is for the apartment are the hot water heaters. So there's big tanks here, and then the heater systems here and here. But otherwise, there's quite a bit of space in here. The radio is actually plugged in right there, and this doorway goes out to the other part of the roof, which I'll just show you out here. So all kinds of mechanical stuff up on the roof here, pigeon, and access to other parts of the roof, but which I may actually make use of if I have other antennas to put up. Anyway, back in the mechanical room. The equipment is over in this direction, and to give you a walk through here. So this is the other half of the TS480 Kenwood transceiver. It's a 200 watt transceiver, which is terrific since you don't really need to have an external power amplifier. I mean, it'd be nice, but you want to make sure there's interference issues. So I can tell that I left it on. You see this red light here. That comes on and off with the power switch downstairs on the radio. This transceiver requires 2 separate power supplies, one for each of the 100 watt power amplifiers that are inside it. You can get a single power supply if you want, but essentially this is the way this one's set up. Here's the other box, the RemoteRig box. So this is for my purposes, has a separate IP address, and I can access that over Wi-Fi downstairs, and everything is, as far as the controls and the radio and everything, is connected to that box. Other hardware I have here is a stepper controller. So I showed you before the software that is controlling this box I can do from downstairs with a web interface. A little noisy in here right now, so hopefully you can hear me okay. Yeah, so I can control all of the most of the functionality of the stepper controller from downstairs, but you do have to have this box at the remote location to be able to make the antenna adjustable. This is a remote interface specifically for the stepper box, so you have to buy that separately. But it also connects to the Ethernet. What we have here is a multi-port Ethernet switch. It doesn't have to be as big as this because I'm really only using 3 ports, but I happen to have a 24-port version hanging around, so I'm reusing it. I'll show you the back of this in a second. This is a dummy load. So from downstairs I can switch between antenna A and antenna B. Antenna A is the primary vertical, stepper vertical. B is this dummy load. So I can tell if there's issues that are being presented caused by antenna, or if I put this on and there's no antenna linked and everything else works normally, that's good. That gives me a good indication of where the problems are, should there be some. Down below, there's a power bar, so everything's just kind of plugged into the power bar. But the thing that makes it really work well for our purposes here on the roof is this auto tuner from LDG. So it's an automatic antenna tuner, and without this, it would be very difficult to get resonant enough so that you don't have any SWR problems. So I'm going to go outside here momentarily. Oh, actually, I was going to show you the back of this. So the thing that's, it looks like a dog's breakfast here a bit, but one of the things that I've done is to try and bypass, not bypass, but to filter every line that's on here with ferrites. So if you look at the ferrites that are clip-on beads, there's a big toroidal version on the power cables. There's toroids everywhere. I think there's about $100 worth of filtered toroids on here, including on the Wi-Fi wires. You can see the back of the switch, which has only got 3 things plugged into it, so lots of empty ports. I actually may be able to add a couple more things. I'm thinking maybe an antenna switch, if I have a VHF antenna up here. And it just leaves lots of flexibility to have so many output ports. And here's a ferrite made by polymer engineers. So it's a bunch of ferrites with silicone, or with a sealant on it here, not the silicone sealant, it's a heat shrink, that's right. And it goes right into the antenna system. So trying as much as I can to try to avoid, try to avoid RF getting into these wires, because the antenna is only 20 feet away. And there's no grounding up here, of course. So there's, we're 250 feet above actual earth ground. This is the cable right here that goes outside to the Ethernet wireless Wi-Fi connection, which actually I forgot to do. I was going to do that first. This is the power over Ethernet cable from up here, so that puts power into the upstairs Wi-Fi transceiver. Okay, so I'm just going to put this back, and then we'll go outside, and I'll show you what's going on out there. Okay, all right, here we are outside on the roof, and we'll go to this portal first. So the roof is actually divided into 4 equal quadrants with the rock covering it. I'll give you a bit of a view here when we get through. So this is basically what it looks like. So you can see the horizon. So I'm looking toward the Alex Fraser Bridge from here, and I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it or not, but so we're looking southeast, mostly south, I guess, and then Gulf Islands all the way around, and the downtown Burnaby you can see off in the distance. But anyway, a little bit closer by is this, and this is really kind of where the magic happens. This little novel stand here is basically an umbrella stand with PVC pipe. You see more ferrites on here trying to keep RF out of the system. So I'm just going to tilt it up here so you can see that the upstairs version, there it is right there, just hangs over the edge. See, I can't look over the edge. It's very safe here. It's, almost 5 feet away. So you really have to make an effort if you're going to fall off the roof. So it's set up to look directly down on my balcony, and then the wire goes just along the outside and over in this direction. So, and just a comment about the roof, like, are they hearing me down below? The penthouses, there's 2 of them. What I'm standing on and the rock is on is the roof of the building, and it's separated probably by about 2 feet from the actual ceiling of the penthouses. So they don't hear me walking on this because there's this space between the roof and their ceiling, so shouldn't be a problem. Okay, so let's just go through here to where the stepper is located, and here it is. So just by luck, there happens to be an opening for air intake, so it didn't have to drill any holes or anything to get the cables outside. They just go right through there. So there's a cable coax, obviously, and this is the cable for the Ethernet Wi-Fi that goes 100 feet that way, and these are the control cables for the stepper, one for the antenna itself and one for the 80-meter box. Okay, so let's just take a look at the antenna situation. Just go up, give you an idea here. Up to the top, 32 feet high, and down below. So what this is 2 inches or 3 inches of styrofoam, just to isolate anything that's going on with the antenna and the base from the stones themselves. So, and then the base is actually kind of neat. Got an aluminum company to do this. So this is a custom aluminum base that's bolted to pressure treated wood so that it won't rot or anything. There's a pole that sticks up right here that the stepper vertical goes down on top of, and then it's self-supporting after that. Now, self-supporting, but I do have some guy lines on it to keep it from whipping around too much. You can see how it's connected right here, and then it doesn't go very far up, but you can see that it's connected up on the pole there, and just to keep the vertical from whipping around too much. If you're familiar with stepper, this is the motor mechanism, EHU as they call it. This is the 80 meter coil that switches in just for the 80 meter band. I tried initially putting on a few radials that were resonant on the bands that I wanted it to be on, and I got some help. Suggestions by people on the website for stepper, that probably what I needed to do is just put as many radials pretty much the same length as possible, and go from there. So I have 30 radials here. You can see them fan out over the surface, and I just got some bricks here to kind of make it a little neater. They come down over here and they go that way, and they're about 16-17 feet each, 15 on this side, 15 on the other. And you know, typical vertical installation, it would probably be happy to have another 30. But anyway, I've got it to the point where the SWR is 2 to 1 or less, pretty much using the vertical, and then the auto tuner gets it down to very close to 1 to 1, 1.5 to 1, so it's very happy at that point. This is a balun to keep RF from floating back. Again, I'm paranoid about that. Having RF flowing back down the coax, and I may be doing actually a little more about fixing that, because I definitely have some issues with RF getting into the transceiver on 10 and 15 meters. So ultimately I may get a large steel box and put all the radio equipment that you saw inside the steel box, and then isolate it from there. Just to kind of give you a view of what's going on here. This is looking toward the east and toward Europe and toward the north, so kind of looking pretty well northeast at that point. But you know, the key issue here is what I'm looking at when I'm looking west. So there is this building, which is the mechanical room where the equipment is. There's this structure on the top here, which is the higher elevator shaft, which is covered, and I believe that's kind of aluminum siding up there. You can see lots of flashing along the edges, and you know, top and bottom, there's all kinds of stuff everywhere. So not an ideal location for an antenna, but you know, when you have to put up with you know, what you're given, then it's not too bad. So I'll just show you over here. There's another area that could have antennas, so I can put an antenna over on that side, and that's looking, I don't know if you can see it on this, but you can see maybe the Lions and Grouse Mountain behind those apartment buildings. So yeah, so that kind of gives you a really good idea of what it looks like here on the roof and how it works. And if you have any questions, let me know.